We all know the story. We can see it in our mind's eye, a scene of desperate, rain-lashed flight. Frodo Baggins, a small figure of immense courage, is fading. The wound from the Morgul knife on Weathertop is spreading, a shard of ice working its way toward his heart. Aragorn, the grim and noble ranger, is pushing him onward, through the Trollshaws, toward the one place that might mean safety, Rivendell. The Black Riders, the Nazgul, are closing in. Every rustle of leaves, every shadow that stretches too long across the path, is a threat. It's a story of courage against impossible odds, of luck holding out at the very last second at the Ford of Bruinen. Frodo, placed on the elf lord Glorfindel's horse, makes a final desperate dash for the river. He crosses, the riders plunge in after him, and the river, answering a hidden command, rises up in a torrent of white horses and crushes them. He collapses and wakes up in the last homely house, safe. It feels like a miracle, a coincidence, a breath of pure, unadulterated luck in a world drowning in shadow. But here's the thing nobody talks about, that luck. It wasn't luck at all. Frodo thought he found a refuge by chance. The truth is, Rivendell had been expecting him for weeks. The safety he stumbled into wasn't a passive sanctuary waiting behind a waterfall. It was the end point of a vast, silent, and incredibly sophisticated intelligence operation orchestrated by a master strategist who had been watching the roads and moving his pieces across the board long before a hobbit ever crossed the Brandywine Bridge. What we're about to uncover changes everything we think we know about that desperate flight. It reframes the story from one of chance into one of design, from a lucky escape into a carefully planned extraction. It reveals a hidden war of information and foresight being waged in the shadows, a war whose victory was not a charge of knights, but the safe arrival of one small, wounded hobbit. So, let me ask you this. What does it mean if the safest place in Middle-earth wasn't just waiting for a hero, but was actively reaching out, pulling him in, and clearing his path through the darkness? To understand the plan, we first have to establish the baseline, the version of the story we all hold as true, and that version is, in itself, a masterpiece of tension. On April 12th of the year 3018 of the Third Age, Gandalf leaves Frodo in Hobbiton with a stark warning. The ring is the one ring of Sauron, and he must leave the Shire. Gandalf promises to return by Frodo's birthday in September to help him, but he never shows up. Frodo, increasingly anxious, waits. He finally leaves Bag End on September 23rd, over 5 months after Gandalf's initial warning. His journey is fraught with peril. He is hunted from the moment he steps out of his door. He narrowly escapes the Nazgul in the Shire, has his strange and unsettling encounter with Tom Bombadil, and is nearly killed in the town of Bree. It is only there, at the Prancing Pony, that he meets Strider, or Aragorn, who seems to be the first piece of good fortune in a journey defined by bad luck. Aragorn guides them, but even he is not invincible. On Weathertop, on October 6th, the party is attacked. The Witch King stabs Frodo with a Morgul blade. From that moment, the journey becomes a race against time. The poison is spreading, and only the skill of Elrond of Rivendell can save him. They are harried and pursued relentlessly. The flight to the Ford of Bruinen is the climax of this desperate chase. It's a 17-day ordeal from Bree to Rivendell, and for much of it, Frodo is dying. When Glorfindel, the golden-haired elf lord, appears as if from a dream, it feels like the first true sign of hope. He puts Frodo on his horse, Asphaloth, and sends him racing ahead. Frodo reaches the ford on October 20th. He defies the Nine and is saved by the flood. He then spends 4 days unconscious, lost in a gray mist, before waking on October 24th, healed in the House of Elrond. It's a thrilling narrative of survival, but it's built on a foundation of seemingly random encounters and last-minute rescues. That's where the official story begins to fray. Because if you look closer, if you dig into the appendices and the letters and the unfinished tales, you find the seams. You start to see the quiet, deliberate hand of Elrond half-elven moving behind it all. The first major complication to the lucky escape narrative is the presence of the elves themselves. Glorfindel doesn't just happen to be out for a ride. Aragorn tells the hobbits that he has met with him and that Elrond had sent him out from Rivendell to search for them. In fact, Tolkien is very specific about this. Elrond, he writes, had sent out riders, elves, and Dúnedain from Rivendell and was watching the lands west of the mountains. But the scale of this operation is what's truly staggering. In one of his letters, Tolkien clarifies the point even further. He says Elrond sent out all his household that he could spare. All of them. This wasn't a token patrol. This was a full-scale mobilization of the security forces of Imladris. Riders were sent north, south, and west. They scoured the wilderness, watching all the roads, all the paths, all the crossings that led to the hidden valley. Why this sudden, massive effort? The timeline gives us the answer. The Nazgûl cross the fords of Isen and enter Eriador on September 22nd. They are in Bree, questioning Barlaman Butterbur on the 29th. They attack Crickhollow that same night and assault Weathertop on October 6th. Elrond's riders were sent out on October 9th. This wasn't a preventative measure. This was a reaction. Elrond knew, somehow, that a small party carrying something of immense value was in mortal danger, somewhere out in the wilderness between Bree and his valley. He knew the Nine were hunting them, so he didn't just hope they'd make it. He sent his best people out to find them and bring them in. The stakes are immediately deepened. This isn't a story about a hobbit seeking refuge anymore. It's a story about a high-value asset being extracted from a hostile territory by an elite team. Glorfindel wasn't a random savior. He was an operative, and he wasn't the only one. Elrond's own sons, Elladan and Elrohir, were out on the same mission. Aragorn himself was part of this network. The Dúnedain, his rangers of the north, had been watching the Shire for years at Gandalf's request, but now their mission had changed. It was no longer a passive watch. It was an active search. They were the eyes and ears of Rivendell in the wild. The entire landscape west of the Misty Mountains had been turned into a search grid. Every ranger, every elf lord dispatched was a node in an information network, feeding intelligence back to a central command. And that central command was Elrond. So the question becomes, how did Elrond know? How did he know enough to launch such a significant operation at that specific time? Gandalf was missing, presumed lost. He hadn't reached Rivendell to sound the alarm. The answer lies in a detail that is often overlooked, a message delivered not by a man or a hobbit, but by a bird. Back in July, Gandalf had gone to Isengard to seek the counsel of Saruman, the head of his order. But Saruman had been corrupted. He betrayed Gandalf and imprisoned him on the pinnacle of the Tower of Orthanc. Gandalf was trapped, cut off from the world, unable to warn Frodo or anyone else. But he had one last move. Before going to Isengard, he had met the wizard Radagast the Brown, who had unwittingly been used as a pawn by Saruman. Gandalf gave Radagast a message to send to all his allies, especially the great eagles of the Misty Mountains. The message was simple: watch for news and carry it to Orthanc. So, on September 18th, Gwaihir the Windlord, Lord of the Eagles, flies to Orthanc. He finds Gandalf imprisoned and rescues him. This is a crucial moment. Where does Gandalf go? He doesn't fly directly to the Shire. He knows he's too late. The Nazgul are already on the move. He asks Gwaihir to take him to Edoras, the capital of Rohan, so he can get a horse. But before they part ways, Gandalf gives the eagle a message for Elrond. We aren't told the exact contents of that message, but we can deduce them. Gandalf would have relayed everything Saruman told him, that the Nine were abroad, that they had crossed the rivers, that they were making for the Shire, and that they were hunting for Baggins. This is the key piece of intelligence. Gwaihir would have flown directly from Rohan to Rivendell, a journey far faster than any horse or man could make. He would have arrived in Rivendell around September 21st or 22nd, just as Frodo was preparing to leave his home. This means Elrond knew the nature of the threat, its target, and its general location, almost a full month before Frodo crossed his threshold. He knew the ring-bearer was a hobbit from the Shire. He knew the Nine were hunting him. He didn't just suspect danger, he had confirmed high-level intelligence from the only other person in Middle-earth who knew the whole story, Gandalf. This completely reframes Elrond's actions. He isn't reacting to rumors, he is acting on solid intel. The dispatch of his riders on October 9th wasn't a panicked search. It was a carefully timed deployment based on the calculated movements of the enemy. He likely waited, gathering information from his scouts and the rangers, trying to pinpoint the hobbit's location before sending in his most powerful agent, Glorfindel, for the final interception. Let's allow ourselves a moment of speculation to imagine what that must have been like inside the last homely house. Picture Elrond in his library, the message from Gwaihir just delivered. The air is still filled with the scent of mountain pines from the eagle's feathers. The message confirms his deepest fears. The enemy has declared his hand. The ring, the bane of his people, the object that cost him his brother and heralded the long defeat of the Eldar, is in play. And it is being carried by one of the halflings, those strange, resilient, and utterly unpredictable creatures that Gandalf has taken such an interest in. What does he do? He does not despair. He does not rush to arms. He thinks. He is Elrond half-elven, bearer of Vilya, the Ring of Air, one of the 3 elven rings of power. He has the gift of foresight, a limited ability to perceive what might be. He would have felt the growing darkness for centuries, but now it has a name and a direction. He summons his chief counselors, his sons, Elladan and Elrohir, who have spent centuries fighting orcs and the servants of the enemy in the wild. He summons Erestor, his chief advisor, and he summons Glorfindel, the reborn hero of Gondolin, one of the most powerful elves remaining in Middle-earth, a being who walked in the light of the trees of Valinor and whose spirit radiates a power that is terrifying to the servants of Shadow. He lays out the intelligence. The 9 are in Eriador. Their target is a hobbit named Baggins from the Shire. Their destination is likely Rivendell, the one place the ring might be safe, or Imladris, the one place their master fears. The mission is not to engage the 9, it is to find the ring-bearer, to secure him, to bring him home. He would have mapped out the possibilities. The hobbits could take the Great East Road, they could try to cross the Horwell further north. They would have to pass through the Trollshaws. He gives his sons and the Dunedain the task of sweeping the land, of being his eyes. He holds Glorfindel in reserve. He is the trump card, a being of such light that the Nazgul, creatures of pure shadow, cannot easily withstand him. He is not a scout. He is a weapon, a shield, and he will be deployed only when the target is located and the threat is imminent. This leads to an uncomfortable question. How much of Frodo's journey was truly his own? He felt he was making choices, to go through the old forest, to stop in Bree, to press on from Weathertop. But from the moment he left the Shire, he was entering a zone of control, a vast, invisible net cast by Elrond. Aragorn's chance meeting in Bree seems less like chance and more like the first point of contact, the first piece of Elrond's plan clicking into place. Aragorn wasn't just a wandering ranger, he was Elrond's foster son, the heir of Isildur, and the field commander of the Dunedain. He was exactly where he needed to be. Rivendell wasn't a passive beacon of hope. It was an active intelligence agency, and its director was Elrond. This coordinated effort, this silent, sweeping operation, is the hidden scaffolding upon which the entire story of the Fellowship rests. But it wasn't just about finding Frodo. That was merely the first phase. The second phase was even more ambitious and even more subtle. It was the engineering of the Council of Elrond itself. We are told that the council was a chance meeting of many peoples. Boromir, son of the Steward of Gondor, arrives in Rivendell on the very evening that Frodo wakes up, having journeyed for 110 days from Minas Tirith. He was guided by a prophetic dream that came first to his brother Faramir, a dream telling him to seek for the sword that was broken in Imladris. Legolas Greenleaf arrives from Mirkwood, a messenger from his father, King Thranduil, bearing ill news. Gollum, who had been held captive there, has escaped, and a delegation of dwarves from the Lonely Mountain, led by Glóin, father of Gimli, has also come seeking Elrond's counsel. They bring word of a messenger from Mordor, who offered them rings of power and friendship in exchange for news of a hobbit. All these separate threads, all these disparate crises from across the continent of Middle-earth converge in one room, in one hidden valley, on one specific day, October 25th, 3018. It is a coincidence of staggering proportions. Or it isn't a coincidence at all. Elrond is described as having the gift of foresight. Gandalf is a Maya, an angelic being with wisdom that runs deeper than mortal comprehension. Is it truly believable that they would leave the fate of the world to such a happy accident? It's far more likely that the council wasn't a fortunate accident, but a deliberate assembly. The dream that guided Boromir, speaking of Imladris and Isildur's bane, is it not possible that this was a summons, sent or guided by the powers of light? Gandalf or Elrond, using their own abilities to plant a seed in the minds of the leaders of men, knowing that the crisis of Gondor was linked to the crisis of the Ring. The timing of Legolas's and Glóin's arrivals is presented as fortune, but Elrond had been in communication with both Thranduil and the dwarves of Erebor for years. He knew of their troubles. When he received Gandalf's message about the ring-bearer, it is entirely plausible that he sent out his own messages, urging them to come, to bring their news, to seek counsel now, at this specific time. He didn't just let the crisis come to him. He gathered all the pieces of the puzzle in one place. The rhythm of the story begins to change. The pace accelerates. What felt like a series of desperate, disconnected struggles now appears as a symphony of converging movements, all conducted by a hidden hand. Think of it. While Frodo and Sam are trudging through the Shire, worrying about mushrooms and avoiding nosy neighbors, a vast network is already buzzing with activity. Gwaihir is carrying a message of world-altering importance across the skies. The Dunedain are moving silently through the woods, their orders updated from a passive watch to an active hunt. Elrond is in Rivendell, not merely waiting, but planning, calculating, and deploying his most trusted agents. Boromir is riding north from the besieged city of Minas Tirith, following the strange compulsion of a dream, a living embodiment of the hope and desperation of men. Legolas is traveling west from Mirkwood, carrying news of a failure that will prove to be a crucial piece of the puzzle. Glóin and his dwarves are journeying from the Lonely Mountain, representing the stoutness and resolve of their people, and bringing direct evidence of Sauron's diplomatic machinations. All these paths, all these lives, all these histories are bending, slowly but surely, toward a single point in space and time, a valley, a house, a council table. The weight of this convergence is immense. It is the culmination of the elves' long, slow war against the shadow. For 3,000 years, Elrond has held Rivendell as a bastion against the darkness. He has seen kingdoms of men rise and fall. He has seen his own people dwindle and fade, their light diminishing as they long for the sea. This is his last great act of defiance in Middle-earth. He is not just protecting a hobbit, he is shaping the future. He is using all of his wisdom, all of his foresight, all of his political and military capital to force a confrontation. He is creating a moment where a choice must be made. The peak tension of the story is no longer just Frodo at the ford. It's the quiet, intellectual tension of Elrond, waiting for all the pieces to arrive. Each report from a scout, each new guest announced at his gates, is another part of his grand strategy falling into place. The arrival of Frodo, wounded but alive, is not the end of the operation. It is the beginning of its true purpose. The asset has been secured. Now the summit can begin. The core insight, the revelation that this has all been building toward, is this. The Council of Elrond was not a meeting to decide what to do about the ring. It was a carefully staged event to ensure that the right thing was done. Elrond and Gandalf already knew the answer. They knew the ring could not be used. They knew it could not be sent over the sea or hidden indefinitely. They knew it had to be destroyed. The only place it could be unmade was in the fires of Mount Doom, where it was forged. They knew this before anyone else even sat down. The entire council, then, was a piece of political theater of the highest order. It was designed to lead everyone else in the room to the same inescapable conclusion. Look at how Elrond runs the meeting. He doesn't open by stating the solution. He lets each party tell their story. He lets Glóin speak of Sauron's offer. He lets Legolas speak of Gollum's escape. He lets Boromir speak of Gondor's peril and his dream. He lets Aragorn's heritage be revealed. He lets Bilbo and Frodo tell the story of the ring itself. He lays out all the evidence, piece by piece, like a master prosecutor. He allows the gravity of the situation to dawn on everyone collectively. He allows them to debate and to discard all the other options, using the ring, hiding it, sending it to Tom Bombadil. He gently guides the conversation, a nudge here, a piece of ancient lore there, until only one terrible, impossible path remains. The journey into Mordor. It is at this moment that the true purpose of the council is revealed. It was not to form a plan, but to form a consensus, to forge a union, to create a fellowship, to ensure that when one small hobbit says, "I will take the ring," he is not alone. Now we must pivot. This rereading of the events leading to the Council of Elrond reveals a different kind of heroism. We are accustomed to celebrating the heroism of the sword stroke, the defiant charge, the last stand. But this is the heroism of foresight, the heroism of administration, the heroism of logistics. It is the quiet, thankless, and utterly essential work of holding the world together. The real world, our world, runs on this kind of heroism every single day. We see the surgeon perform a life-saving operation, but we don't see the schedulers, the nurses, the technicians, the cleaners who made that operation possible. We see the scientific breakthrough, but we don't see the years of grant writing, failed experiments, and painstaking data entry that led to it. Elrond, in this reading, is the ultimate project manager. He is the overlooked hero of this entire chapter of the story, a leader whose greatest weapon was not his sword or his ring of power, but his ability to see the whole board and to quietly move the pieces into place. Glorfindel is another. He is a warrior of immense renown, a slayer of a Balrog. But his task here is not glorious. It is to be a courier, an escort, to ride through the rain-soaked woods not for glory, but to find a sick hobbit and get him to safety. His heroism is in his service, his willingness to use his immense power for a task that others might see as beneath them. This invisible labor, this quiet coordination, is the bedrock of hope. This understanding doesn't diminish Frodo's courage or Sam's loyalty or Aragorn's strength. It deepens them. It places them within a larger context of support and care. Frodo wasn't just lucky. He was loved. He was valued, not just by his friends, but by the wise and the powerful who saw in him, and in his kind, the hope for the world. They didn't leave that hope to chance. They nurtured it. They protected it. They cleared a path for it, even when the Pathfinder himself didn't know it. This connects to a profound human truth. We often feel like we are struggling alone against the darkness, like Frodo in the wilderness. We feel that our survival depends on our own grit and a healthy dose of luck. But more often than not, there are hidden forces at work in our lives. There is a network of support we don't always see. The teacher who saw a spark in us, the friend who sent a message at just the right time, the parent who worked an extra shift, the stranger who offered a kind word. These are the Glorfindels and the Elronds of our own stories. They are the ones watching the roads for us, sending out help we didn't even know we needed. They are the architects of our lucky breaks. The emotion this evokes is not triumphant, but something quieter, more profound. It is a sense of awe, tinged with a gentle melancholy. Awe at the scale of the hidden plan, at the depth of Elrond's wisdom and care, and melancholy for all the quiet heroism that goes unseen and unsung in stories and in life. The real magic of Rivendell wasn't in its waterfalls or its starlight. It was in its foresight, its planning, its quiet, stubborn refusal to let hope fail. It was the understanding that the greatest victories are not won on the battlefield, but in the library, at the council table, and in the hearts of those who are willing to do the thankless work of watching the roads. The world is saved not just by those who carry the ring, but by those who ensure the ring-bearer has a path to walk. So let's go back to where we started, to that desperate figure on a white horse, racing for the river. Frodo Baggins, feeling the cold of the Nazgul's breath on his neck, the shadow of their despair clouding his mind. He feels utterly alone. He believes his survival, and the survival of his quest, rests on this one final mad dash. He is the hero of the moment, and his courage is undeniable. But as we now know, he is not alone. Just out of sight, Glorfindel is there, his elven power holding the riders at bay for a precious few seconds. Further back, Aragorn and the other hobbits are following, armed with fire, ready to make their own stand. And miles away, in his valley, a wise lord is waiting, his will already reaching out to the waters of the river Bruinen, preparing to unleash a power that the servants of Sauron cannot master. The refuge was never just a place on a map. It was an active force, a reaching hand. Frodo didn't stumble into safety. He was met halfway. He was drawn in. He was expected. The story we thought was about luck becomes a story about a deep and abiding faith. Not a blind faith, but a faith backed by intelligence, strategy, and tireless effort. A faith that Elrond and Gandalf had in the goodness of ordinary people, in the strength of hobbits. They didn't just hope Frodo would succeed. They built a plan around the certainty that he must, and that, perhaps, is the most powerful lesson of all. Hope is not a passive wish. It is an active strategy. It is the long, quiet, and often invisible work of preparing the way for the good to triumph. It is watching the roads, even when you don't know who is coming. It is sending out riders into the dark, on the faith that there is someone worth finding. The next time you read that chapter or watch that scene, remember the silent network that made it possible. Remember the quiet heroism that doesn't make it into the songs, and maybe ask yourself, who in your own life has been watching the roads for you? Who has been your Glorfindel, your Aragorn, your Elrond? And for whom, in turn, are you watching the roads? Because in the end, that is how the darkness is held back. Not by one great hero, but by the countless quiet acts of a fellowship that most of us never even see.